Jacob Performance again. Gonna do a installation of these BFI Stage 1 mounts today on Matt's car. Got just the insert for the transmission side. So some of the newer cars, and there is no definite cutoff for when and why and all that nonsense. So you have to physically get in there and look, or do it heated and buy a used mount off eBay. So these rivets are just dead soft aluminum, and all that does is keep the two pieces of the mount connected, where this fluid filled ball of squishiness gets replaced with this. It's the softer of the durometers that BFI offers, and this option is what, $200 cheaper than the full replacement mount. So well worth drilling these rivets out, and we'll show you how to do that. Super straightforward. I've already got the battery out. The ECU will have to come out, the intake obviously, and we've got his HID ballast mounted to the intake. So just a little bit of prep work, gaining access, and the transmission side's a lot more, I wouldn't really call it, hey buddy.
Can I play that game?
Sure. This side's a little bit more difficult just because of the stuff that's in the way, but I'll show you the combination of tools I use to make that manageable. And then of course the engine mount is pretty straightforward. And yeah, we're doing it on a 2-post lift, but it's not really any different than doing it on quick jacks, on jack stands, or even on ramps. I have an engine support bar, but a small light duty jack is your best bet with a block of wood to protect the transmission or engine, whichever side you're lifting. Because all you really need to do is just support the weight of whichever components mount you're after. The engine support bar, it's not even worth the hassle for this job, because all we're doing is just kind of hovering, and the jack makes it easy to get your alignment just right. And we'll get into that once we get to that point. So I'm gonna get to ripping and tearing on. All right, so we've got rubber chock on a floor jack under there, just gentle upward pressure on the transmission. And we've got this wire-in loom unclipped. It takes a little bit of force, but just a firm pull there and there. And 16 millimeters buried under there. We've got 4 of those and 3 18 millimeters. So 45 foot-pounds going back together here, 35 foot-pounds on the smaller ones. And this is the trickiest part, because you've got to kind of use a different combination of extensions and universals to get your angles and shift the wire loom from side to side to be able to get to all 4 of these bolts. I know it's a little bit unnerving to be prying around and pulling on plastic, but as long as you're careful, you're able to get in there. These are actually cheap Harbor Freight extensions, but it's got a ball end, which kind of helps with this, as well as, so we're learning my new toolbox, a universal extension like this will basically get you what you need. With that said, when you use a torque wrench, it is like day one, rule one, that you don't use a universal. You may or may not have to kind of bend that rule here, just because you're not going to strip all the wiring off your car to do motor mounts. With that said, 35 foot-pounds isn't a super high or critical torque. It actually feels like a lot when you go to do it, just because of how confined it is. But I'm confident you guys at home can knock this out. So we're gonna keep going, and I'll show you what it looks like when it's all blown apart. All right, so the OEM mount's out, nothing moved, so going back together should be straightforward. There's your empty hole. Now, his mount coming out actually was the correct type, so we're gonna rebuild it. But just for comparison's sake, this is the kind of slop I can get without any leverage with just my hands, with the factory rubber squishy boy mount in there. So I'll show you how to go about displaying this part. So we've got it clamped in. I've done them just kind of rolling around on the shop floor too. Center punch. then doesn't need to be any particular size of drill bit. Just don't want to be huge or too small. You can run a higher drill speed because this is aluminum. Quite enough. Kind of relying on rubber here, so not the best way to hold it, but it's for video's sake. There's one. There goes two. Alright, so the transmission mount is torqued, batteries back in, ECU and the wiring harness are back in. We discovered this coming apart. Where did I set the
There it is.
So this is integrated engineering V1 intake. So part of their engineering plan is to not test things apparently. So we're all the way through this 065 aluminum and took 11 thousandths of stainless off this coolant line from the way it was sitting in here. So actually I guess it was this way. So we're gonna knock out the engine mount and then fabricate a new tube that fits properly. I guess we could probably play with this a little bit, but it doesn't change the fact that it has a hole in it. So it's been on the car for what, basically the entire life of the car.
30,000 miles.
30,000 miles. So damage is done. We're gonna reuse the rest of the integrated intake, or at least that's the plan. We're gonna wrap up the mount install first. That'll probably be its own thing. So just word to the wise, if you've got integrated engineering intake on your car, one of the 9 V1 revisions or the V2, or if you got a V3 in the mail, I'm sure those will come out anytime now. Just do a good once over. I've also seen intakes built incorrectly where they're chafing this brake line. I've touched on that before. The Blue Rabbit edition that's always here was a victim of that. So gonna pull this ballast and the reservoir out of the way. We've already got the engine supported, and this mount is as straightforward as they come compared to the other side. So knock that out. So stock sloppy boy coming out. Got our old hardware over here. New hardware here. It's as simple as just dropping it into place. The better supported you have the engine, the less drama you could potentially run into. Let me double check these are single link. Yeah. So this thing didn't move at all. But there is a slight gap here. I'm guessing the thickness of BFI might be a little bit different. At least I didn't think it moved at all. So we'll bring that up so it just barely kisses. And then run those down. Barely starting those so we can. All right, so the mount to engine are gonna be 45 foot-pounds. And the smaller mount to body, which are, I'll have to double check when I grab it, they should be 15 millimeter. So a different size in the stock hardware. We'll go 35 foot-pounds on those. So 15 millimeter to 35 foot-pounds. All right, so the engine side's all locked down. Got a spacer in there. So this ballast is actually hovering over the mount, not touching anything. Just like we had on the OEM one. And that's a wrap. We're gonna hold there and deal with this intake fiasco. But there's your BFI mount installation. We didn't do the dog bone because he already had the dog bone insert installed, but I can touch on that another time if anybody's interested. It's pretty straightforward. The main thing there is just having the car level. Obviously we're level because it's on a 2-post lift, but if you're going to perform the dog bone insert installation on ramps or anything, just be prepared for the engine to rock out of alignment, because that pendulum mount is what controls the engine's rotation. So just be aware of that. Comment below if you guys need that video. I can always get under the car and add that in, but it's pretty straightforward. It's really only one bolt. My only advice on that is, I don't have one sitting here, but the OEM bolt has just a stepped head, and the BFI bolt comes with a big fat washer. During the installation, if you just leave the OEM bolt loosely installed and you lube up the insert while you're hammering it in, that factory bolt will actually fit through the circle, which is the reason the hole in the BFI insert is large enough to clear that head, which is why they give you such a large washer. So if you leave that in there, the OEM rubber mount is 2 pieces, and leaving that bolt in there will prevent you from accidentally knocking the top piece up through the subframe, which sucks. Ask me how I know. I did it way back in the day on a Mark 6. So with that bolt in place, you can't knock the upper mount out while you're hammering in the lower mount, which with some any kind of lube, even water will work if you don't have any grease. Hammering that in there, and then remove the stock bolt and put the big pancake washer they supply in, and you'll be good to go with no drama. So thanks for watching. Subscribe if you haven't. Probably shoot another video today for how to fix that there V1. We'll be prototyping their V3 intake. Actually, we're gonna send them the. I'm sure V2. No, I'm sure it's good stuff. Who am I? who am I to doubt an engineer? But all right, so we'll follow up with that. Thanks for watching. All right, so we're here in Marion, Virginia, just following up. I've held off on posting the BFI mount install video so we can get Matt's thoughts on them. Rick, the cameraman here. Here's the solution for that IE intake that was chafed through. You can see the damage on this stainless coolant line here. And after some looking around online, this is an extremely common problem for the V1 intakes. So if you have one from Integrated Engineering, make sure you take a look at yours. There was one post where somebody's coolant line had ruptured and sprayed coolant in the intake and all over the bay. So on a trip like today, we're probably gonna do 500 to 600 miles, and I'm 2 states from home, so I definitely wouldn't want to have problems like that. So I'm considering making this a production part and doing a group buy on those. So for all you V1 peasants who didn't spring for V2 when Integrated decided to fix it, I could have you covered there. We'll see. And I've got stage 2 mounts, so we'll let him tell you about stage 1.
So I have stage 2 dog bone insert, and then stage 1 engine transmission. It's one of those things that you don't know how bad, at least from my experience, how bad your stock mounts were until you put these in. I had no additional harshness or vibrations, a little bit of added noise, but the car just feels awesome now. Just planted to the road, drivetrain slop is gone, just a whole lot better all the way around.
And what accentuated the problem with your OEM mounts, tune-wise?
Yeah, well, yeah. So it's one of those things you didn't realize how bad it was on the Unitronic tune. Went to an EQT tune beginning of November, and then the issues that the stock mounts have, just general squishiness, became much more apparent. So it's time to get those out.
So basically, for anybody who's got an off-the-shelf tune, especially something weak sauce like Unitronic, if it's a big enough power difference to feel it in the drive line slop, you know EQT is definitely earning their money on those tunes. Good stuff.
Yep.
We might have, well, I don't know if we'll have another equally paired car here. My car is IS38, everybody that follows the channel knows that, but we've got 4 cars coming from Virginia. They'll be similar power level. I know a couple of them are 1.8s. One of them is APR stage 2. So I don't know how willing he'd be to travel to Mexico, but we're not here to race anyway. We're just here to enjoy the roads, and hopefully the sun will keep helping us out. We'll do a separate video on that trip. It will be the back of the Dragon mountain drive. So subscribe if you haven't, and there you go.